Embodiments can enable, whereas embodiments are also known to disable. Same for things smaller than you. So I'm doubling down. Rainbow Bright had these armors that she put over her legs, and these looked like little rings that were colorful, but we don't know what under them, if those were actually her legs or if they were fabric and armor. Well, one episode, she falls and breaks one. Does she break her leg or does she break her armor? We don't know, because what if when it cracked, a whole bunch of light came out, and that's how she was able to walk on rainbows, was those rings constituted for her body being part of the fabric. She was part both. No different than Pinocchio's innards. Or what if she was just really good at adapting and evolved, where that broken ring, it would be just like the bone. I was thinking how bones, when they leave outside of your body, they have a decision to like split and reincarnate themselves inside out for a gosh darn reason, because they've got this dried up coral inside of them, filaments of cartilage. And I think that is like a seed germinating and sprouting out. If a bone pops out, that's what it would be thinking. That's just my opinion of the skeletal structure. I think it's a part of its own, wanting to make a part outside of you if it so happens to protrude out. So Rainbow Bright is no exception. With one of her rings broke, and all she does is make rainbows with those rings. Well, that ring is going to want to envelope and encase her within. But what if that was, like I said earlier, her adaptive power, where she, like Sonic the Hedgehog, would go into a ball and spin really quickly? Or Rufio, the fat guy in the movie Hook, where he goes down into a ball and rolls in off of a ship. If Rainbow Bright would do that on the rainbows as a second counterpart, where she was just going super quickly as a ball, that would be like Alice in Wonderland and Tim Burton's movie, where she's inside of a contraption and it moves really quickly because it's circular. That adaptation, I think, could give her an ability to go to the next level. And then Rainbow Bright, even though she broke one ring, could see better days. Tripling down, where they're and having a lobotomy, if you have one, it's gonna be what they did in the olden days, is stick a ice pick through your cranium. Now, what this would be attempting is to do acupuncture, but with your visual cortex, part of the brain. And so if you would configure your entire epidermis as the envelopes of your brain, they would be aiming for the visual cortex. Now, if you were not having eyes and using your hands to feel, this is similar to what microbes do. That's how they're living. But for Rainbow Bright, when she's using her mobility as rainbows to walk on them, if she breaks one of her rings on her legs, is she able to still propagate rainbows out and then just roll down them? Or would she need something similar to a lobotomy on her exterior, mainly the ring that broke, in order to enable her to be mobile? Sizes of the Statue of Liberty. And here's what polar opposite. I noticed I mentioned the word white, is when if you have light all together, it's going to make white. The more and more of it you put together, because light has no matter in it. And that's the facts of matter and polar opposition utilized through optic visualization. Entire world, there couldn't be a better example of going outside and looking around at people, where if they look any different for some reason, it just baffles me. But I'm about to, milk and honey in the land of milk and honey, but then there's like a spike, and if there's one spike, you get a restriction. And so understanding in music boxes how the spikes make pretty sounds. Sounds are all relative, where if it doesn't matter what it's made out of, concrete or metal, if it's a giant tube, giant things that are hollow tend to sound metallic, just because that's the way God made the world. So in instruments that are giant of proportion sizes, like of Statue of Liberty's, if it's hollowed out, it would sound metallic even though it's cement-like. And so that's a big thing I'm trying to strive for, is making a board game. But I understand these statues, if you want them to be as big as the Statue of Liberty, you've got to know the dynamics within it. And so making something like a spine be a giant, the enrichments of angular momentum, just because it isn't safe. It would be a bump in the road, handicapped, and had leprosy. That would be the worst thing that could happen to anyone, just because I thought of the worst possible thing. The good guys finishing last when the race isn't even won. They're just having a good time the entire time. I don't know if it's gears in a vehicle, but surely if you stick a stick inside of a wheel spoke, that sucker's gonna freeze like throwing a monkey wrench inside of a machine. And so if in vehicles, embodiments can enable, whereas embodiments are also known to disable. Should be the same for things smaller than you. A piece of you-know-what. Whereas by dive bombing is like savage, and sneak attacking what the Care Bears would probably be trying to onto the My Pretty Ponies. And so both of those are horrific and savage. Whereas in a eulogy, it's out in the open and they're not trying to hide, and it's that much more civil. And I tend to shy away from religion because it has stigma written all over it and used for propaganda. Propaganda such as politics wouldn't be necessary if they didn't have everything they wanted. So in the similar sense with relating a caliber of a firearm into a laser gun, that's physical, but we're trying to cover across the board. You need mental to properly articulate a mechanical and digital relation of the two to get a maximum afterburner as an overdrive. If you want to write that down, please quote me on what I'm about to say next. If you have something what Hollywood did is distort everyone's mind into needing a villain in order to win. No, it's much better than that. Whereas with the good guys finishing last when the race isn't even won, they're just having a good time the entire time. The groups that are polar opposites would be encumbered as something as gruesome with then something as pleasant, when there's the iconic figures of what would be Care Bears and then the My Pretty Pony. These two colonies are cherished because they're pleasing. However, there is one thing where I turned on, I was watching for a brief moment how it was oddly abrupt how they were getting ready for battle. These prancing ponies were gaining wings and growing horns. Like, oh my gosh, they're about to dive bomb probably the Care Bears, and what would occur next is uncivil bloodshed, and that would be something as what they would obtain would be much more horrific than what their polar opposites, the Addams family, what they would be undergoing is stuff they would enjoy, probably a eulogy. I think a eulogy is read in like graveyards, and that's something that seems as demeaning, but if they would be encumbering a eulogy with someone like Beetlejuice, where he is comforted by the showing up and meeting the Addams family at a eulogy. That's 10 times more respected and sound than these Care Bears and Pretty Pony colonies about to handle each other by manhandling each other.